jump should have been routine. 33 minutes of calculations, a brief moment of non-existence as the ship tore through space-time, and emergence into a new star system where the Cylons couldn't follow. That was the plan. That was always the plan. Commander Anastasia Duala's hands moved across the Dratus console with practiced efficiency, her eyes tracking the scanner returns that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat over the past months. Cylon base star accelerating, Admiral. They're launching raiders. Admiral William Adama stood at the center of Galactica's Combat Information Center, his weathered face carved from stone. Around him, the CIC hummed with controlled urgency. Officers calling out jump coordinates, engineers monitoring the FTL spooling sequence, and overhead the ancient Battlestar's hull groaning under the strain of yet another desperate escape. The fleet had been running for so long that the sound of enemy contact had become a rhythm they all knew by heart. Status of the civilian fleet? Adama's voice was steady, a captain's calm in the eye of a storm. All ships report FTL systems ready, Lieutenant Felix Gaida responded, fingers dancing across his console. Jump coordinates locked. 30 seconds. 27 civilian vessels, 50,000 souls, all hanging on the word of an old warhorse, Adama muttered, too quiet for anyone else to hear. He'd led these people across star systems, through Cylon ambushes, past the ghosts of their destroyed colonies. Every jump was a miracle. Every emergence was borrowed time. See, nuclear launch detected. Duala's voice cut through the CIC. Inbound. Impact in 40 seconds. All hands, prepare for emergency jump, Adama commanded. Gaida, spool the FTL now. We're not waiting. Admiral, the calculations aren't complete. I said now, Lieutenant. The Galactica shuddered as her FTL drives engaged prematurely. Jump calculations were sacred. Coordinates verified. Gravitational fields mapped. Emergence vectors triple-checked. A blind jump was suicide, but a nuclear warhead was certainty. Gaida's face went pale as his screen erupted in warning symbols. Sir, the calculations are fragmenting. The FTL computer is... The Cylon missile struck Galactica's aft section. Not a direct hit, but close enough. The electromagnetic pulse washed through the ship's systems, and in the microsecond between catastrophe and oblivion, the FTL drive activated with corrupted data screaming through its computational matrix. Reality twisted. In the colonial understanding of faster-than-light travel, a jump was a brief moment of non-existence. The ship ceased to be in one location and resumed being in another. Clean. Simple. Instantaneous. This was not that. Galactica and her fleet tore through space-time like a bullet through wet paper. The jump should have lasted a heartbeat. Instead, it stretched across seconds that felt like hours. The ship groaning and screaming as fundamental forces that should never touch mortal constructions pulled at every rivet, every weld, every bulkhead. In the CIC, officers clutched their stations as gravity failed, then doubled, then failed again. And then, with a sound like the universe taking a breath, they emerged. Dratus contact. Multiple contacts. Duala's voice cracked with something Adama had never heard from her before. Confusion. Admiral, I'm reading... I don't understand these signatures. They're not Cylon. They're not Colonial. They're not anything in our database. Adama stepped to the Dratus display, his eyes narrowing at the constellation of unknown contacts. Dozens of ships, scattered across the system, some larger than anything the colonies had ever built. And the stars beyond the viewport, wrong. Constellations he'd known since Academy days, gone. Replaced by alien patterns that belonged to no chart he'd ever studied. Where are we? Gaida whispered. Before Adama could answer, a new contact blazed across Dratus. Small craft, moving with impossible speed and agility. Their energy signatures like nothing the colony's sensors had ever registered. And they arrowed toward Galactica on an intercept course, and behind them, something larger emerged from behind a moon. A ship shaped like a wedge, bristling with weapons, its hull white as bone. Receiving transmission, Duala reported. Audio only. Language is... I think it's translating, but the syntax is strange. Put it through. The CIC speakers crackled to life, and a voice emerged. human, tense, speaking words that should have been gibberish but somehow resolved into meaning through technology Adama couldn't begin to understand. Unknown vessels. This is Phoenix Squadron of the Rebel Alliance. You have entered a contested system. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire. Respond immediately. Adama's jaw tightened. Rebel Alliance. Not Cylons, not Colonies, something else entirely. He glanced at the tactical display. The wedge-shaped ship had weapons hot, and those small fighters were spreading into attack formation. Behind them, another contact was emerging, larger. Imperial-class Star Destroyer, the Galactica's computer helpfully informed him, cross-referencing against absolutely nothing in colonial records. Admiral, Duala prompted. 50,000 civilians, a battered Battlestar, fuel reserves at 37%, ammunition depleted from the Cylon engagement, no star charts, no idea where or when they were. Open a channel, Adama said quietly. All hands, condition 1. Launch the alert Vipers, and someone get me President Roslin. In the viewport beyond, the stars of an unknown galaxy glittered cold and indifferent. The Colonial Fleet had jumped blind before. They'd always emerged somewhere in their own universe, their own space, their own fight. Not this time. The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of destiny and purpose. The Jedi speak of it as a living energy field, the Sith as a tool of domination. But nowhere in their ancient philosophies, nowhere in their prophecies or holocrons, had anyone considered what would happen when something from beyond the galaxy arrived. Something that existed outside the Force's reach, brought by technology rather than mysticism, carrying its own wars, its own desperation, its own 50,000 souls who had never felt the Force's touch. Admiral Adama stared at the unknown ships and made a decision that would change both their fates. Prepare to respond, and make sure our nuclear arsenal is ready. Just in case. If you want to see more characters and fleets enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character or ship you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Dratus screen pulsed with contacts that belonged to a galaxy far, far away from the 12 colonies. And the Colonial Fleet, searching for Earth, had found something else entirely. The Viper. Mark 7 screamed through the vacuum, its pilot's hand steady on the control stick despite the impossible situation unfolding before her eyes. Captain Kara, Starbuck Thrace, had flown against Cylon raiders for months, had threaded needles through debris fields and asteroid belts, had pulled maneuvers that should have torn her ship apart. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for this. Apollo, you seeing this? Her voice crackled over the wireless to her wingman. Captain Lee, Apollo Adama's Viper, held formation off her starboard side, and she could hear the tension in his response. I see it, Starbuck. I just don't believe it. The fighter craft approaching them were unlike anything in colonial design philosophy. No wings, because why would you need wings in space? Their fuselages were elongated, almost insectoid, with solar panel arrays extending like mandibles. They moved with a grace that suggested either exceptional pilots or flight computers more sophisticated than anything the colonies had developed. The IFF tagged them as X-Wings, a designation that meant absolutely nothing. Phoenix leader to unknown craft, a voice transmitted. Female, young, with an edge of authority. You are in violation of Imperial space. Identify yourselves immediately or we will engage. Starbuck toggled her wireless. Unknown craft, this is Viper flight from the Battlestar Galactica. We mean no harm. We're lost. Requesting navigational assistance and peaceful contact. There was a pause. Then, Battlestar? Viper? What kind of ships are those, and what do you mean you're lost? Long story, Starbuck muttered off-channel, onto the unknown pilot. We'd be happy to explain, but maybe we could do it without weapons pointed at each other? The X-Wings maintained their intercept course, but Starbuck's threat receiver wasn't screaming. Not yet. These pilots were cautious, not aggressive. That was something. Aboard Galactica, Admiral Adama stood in the CIC watching the fighter engagement on the main tactical display while President Laura Roslin arrived, flanked by her aide Billy Kakea. The president's face was pale but composed, the resignation of someone who'd learned to expect disaster at every turn. "Admiral, what's our situation?" she asked, her voice carrying the exhaustion of leadership. "We've made an emergency jump, Madam President. Our FTL calculations were corrupted during the Cylon attack. We've emerged in an unknown star system with no reference points in our navigational database." Adama gestured to the Dratus display. "We've been contacted by two separate factions, something calling itself the Rebel Alliance, and another entity they refer to as the Empire. From what we're gathering, we've stumbled into the middle of a civil war." Roslin absorbed this with the practiced calm of someone who'd already witnessed the end of her civilization. "How bad is it?" "Unknown. The vessels we're detecting use technology we don't understand. Energy weapons, propulsion systems that don't match our FTL drives, and what appears to be artificial intelligence integrated into every ship we've scanned." Adama's jaw tightened. "The droids concern me, Madam President, after what the Cylons did. One disaster at a time. Our Admiral." Roslin moved to the Dratus console, studying the display with a politician's eye for strategic positioning. "What do they want?" "The Rebel Alliance wants us to power down and prepare for boarding. They seem to think we're associated with their enemy." "And the Empire?" "Haven't heard from them yet. But that Star Destroyer has launched its own fighter complement. We're about to have company from both sides." In the viewport, a new formation of craft appeared. Angular, predatory, their hulls the color of charcoal. TIE fighters, the Dratus computer helpfully labeled them, again referencing a database that shouldn't exist. They flew in perfect formation, 6 craft in a precise hexagonal pattern, and they were moving fast. "Galactica Actual Apollo," Lee's voice crackled over the wireless. "We've got new contacts inbound. Hostile configuration. Permission to engage if fired upon?" Adama exchanged a glance with Roslin. The president nodded slowly. "Tell your pilots to defend themselves, Admiral. But don't start a war if we can avoid it." "You heard the lady," Adama transmitted. "Weapons free for defensive fire only. Do not, repeat, do not, initiate engagement." Starbuck watched the TIE fighters approach, her thumb hovering over the firing stud. The X-Wings had broken formation, clearly responding to the new threat. Whatever conflict existed in this strange galaxy, it was about to play out with the Colonial Fleet caught in the middle. "Apollo, stay tight. These people clearly have history. Let's not become part of it." "Too late for that," Apollo responded. "They're breaking toward us." The TIE fighters screamed past the Vipers, their twin ion engines howling in a frequency that set Starbuck's teeth on edge. They ignored the colonial craft entirely, focusing instead on the X-Wings. Emerald bolts of energy, not kinetic rounds, not missiles, but pure, coherent light, lanced through the vacuum. One X-Wing exploded in a brilliant fireball, its pilot's scream cut short on the wireless. "Frack!" Starbuck hauled her Viper into a hardbank, muscle memory taking over. "They're using energy weapons. Apollo, evasive pattern Delta." The X-Wings returned fire, red lance meeting green in a deadly dance. Another TIE fighter exploded and another, but the Imperial craft were relentless. They moved with mechanical precision, their tactics suggesting either exceptional training or, Starbuck's stomach turned, computer-guided piloting. "Lee Phoenix leader to Galactica," the young woman's voice crackled through the chaos. "If you're not with the Empire, prove it. We need support now." Adama's voice cut through the wireless channel to his pilots. "Negative, Viper flight. Hold position. This is not our fight." Starbuck watched an X-Wing spiral out of control, its pilot ejecting in a small pod that tumbled through space. The TIE fighters were already vectoring toward the next target. "Not our fight," the old man had said. But Starbuck had spent months watching people die because someone decided a fight wasn't worth the risk. "Starbuck, don't," Apollo began. She was already moving, her Viper accelerated to combat speed, kinetic energy weapons hot, targeting computer locking onto the lead TIE fighter. The colonial craft might not have energy weapons, but decades of warfare had taught humanity how to kill with metal, moving very, very fast. "This is Starbuck to unknown hostiles. Break off your attack or I will fire." The TIE fighters ignored her. That was their mistake. Starbuck's finger squeezed the trigger, and her Viper's KEW system roared to life. 30mm armor-piercing rounds crossed the distance at hypersonic velocity, tearing through the lead TIE fighter's viewport and shredding the pilot inside. The craft spiraled wildly, its twin engines flaring before it exploded in a silent blossom of fire. The remaining TIE fighters broke formation, clearly surprised. The X-Wings rallied, pressing their advantage. And aboard Galactica, Admiral Adama closed his eyes briefly, knowing his pilot had just made a choice that couldn't be unmade. "Why, so much for staying neutral," Roslin murmured. The battle continued, Colonial Vipers and Rebel X-Wings now fighting side by side against Imperial TIE fighters, and somewhere in the distance, that massive Star Destroyer was turning its enormous bulk toward them. The Colonial Fleet had survived the fall of the 12 colonies. They'd survived Cylon pursuit across countless star systems. Now they would have to survive a galaxy that didn't know they existed, caught between factions in a war they didn't understand. Admiral Adama opened a fleet-wide channel. "All civilian ships prepare for emergency jump. Coordinates to follow. We're leaving this system." "Admiral," Gaeta interrupted, his voice tight. "FTL drive is still damaged from the corrupted jump. We need at least 6 hours for repairs." 6 hours. The Star Destroyer would reach them in less than one. Adama stared at the tactical display, 50,000 lives hanging on decisions made in heartbeats. "Then we fight." The Rebel command ship Ghost hung in space 3,000 meters off Galactica's port bow, close enough for visual contact, but far enough to retreat if things went badly. Inside its cramped cockpit, Hera Syndulla studied the massive vessel with professional interest and growing concern. "That's no Mon Calamari cruiser," she murmured, adjusting her leku over her shoulder. "Chopper, are you getting these readings?" The astromech droid beside her beeped irritably, its dome swiveling as it processed the sensor data. The response was characteristically pessimistic. "I know it's old," Hera snapped, "but old doesn't mean helpless. Look at those armor plates. That's military-grade battleship construction. And those launch tubes? They've deployed at least 40 fighters, and their bays aren't even half empty." Her co-pilot, the Lasat warrior, Garazeb Zeb Aurelios, grunted from the gunner's station. "Yeah, well, those fighters just fragged 3 TIE fighters using slug throwers. Actual kinetic rounds. Who does that anymore?" "Someone who doesn't have access to Tabana gas," Hera replied thoughtfully. "Or someone from very, very far away." On Galactica's flight deck, Starbuck brought her Viper in hot, the landing skids screeching against the deck as Chief Tyrol's recovery crew swarmed the craft. She popped the canopy and vaulted out, already moving toward the pilot's ready room where she knew Apollo would be waiting to chew her out for disobeying orders. She was right. Lee stood with arms crossed, his flight suit still damp with sweat. "That was reckless even for you." "They were slaughtering those pilots," Starbuck shot back. "Say, was I supposed to just watch?" "Yes, we have no idea who these people are, what their conflict is about, or what we just involved ourselves in." Lee's voice dropped. "My father gave an order, Kara. You ignored it. Your father's order would have gotten innocent people killed. And your decision might have gotten 50,000 people killed." The two pilots stared at each other, the old argument playing out in new circumstances. Before either could continue, the wireless crackled overhead. "Captain Thrace, Captain Adama, report to the CIC immediately." The Combat Information Center was crowded when they arrived. Admiral Adama stood at the main console with President Roslin, Colonel Saltai, and someone new, a young woman in an orange flight suit, her dark hair pulled back, a suspicious expression on her face. The rebel pilot. "Nah, Captain Thrace," Adama's voice was glacial. "This is Hera Syndulla, captain of the rebel ship Ghost. She's requested permission to come aboard to discuss our mutual situation." Starbuck met the rebel pilot's eyes. There was steel there, and exhaustion, the look of someone who'd been fighting longer than she cared to remember. Familiar. "Your intervention saved my pilots," Hera said carefully, "but it's also made you Imperial targets. That Star Destroyer is the Relentless, commanded by Governor Price. She doesn't forgive, and she doesn't negotiate." "We didn't ask to be part of your war," Roslin interjected. We're refugees. We've been running from our own enemies for months. We just want to find a safe harbor and make repairs. Hera's expression softened slightly. Refugees? From where? Your ships don't match any design in Imperial or Republic records. And your language, the translation matrix barely works. It's like you're speaking a dialect that diverged thousands of years ago. Try another universe entirely, Ty muttered. The rebel pilot's eyes widened. That's not possible. And yet, Adama gestured to the viewport where the unfamiliar stars gleamed. Here we are. Before Hera could respond, Dwala's voice cut through the tension. Admiral, the Relentless is launching additional TIE squadrons. Count is 72 fighters, and they're charging forward weapons batteries. Gaeta pulled up tactical overlays. Fleet-wide status report. Galactica's FTL drive needs 4 more hours minimum. Civilian ships are ready to jump, but without Galactica as escort, he didn't need to finish. When everyone in the CIC knew what happened to undefended civilian vessels. What about your people? Adama asked Hera directly. Can you provide cover? Phoenix Squadron has 12 X-Wings operational, against 72 TIEs and a Star Destroyer? Hera shook her head. We'd buy you minutes, not hours. Then we fight with what we have, Adama stated. How many Vipers can we launch, Chief? Through the wireless, Tyrrell's voice responded, 61 birds ready for combat operations, sir. Munitions are at 43%. Most pilots are already exhausted from the Cylon engagement. Roslin stepped forward, her voice cutting through the military planning. Admiral, we didn't survive the Cylon genocide just to die in someone else's war. There has to be another option. I'm open to suggestions, Madam President. It was Hera who spoke, her words measured. There might be one. My people have a base. Hidden. Heavily defended. If you could reach it, we could provide repairs, supplies, even temporary sanctuary. But it's 12 parsecs from here, and the Empire has been hunting for it for months. How do we get there? Adama asked. Hyperspace jump. Standard nav computer coordinates. Should take... Hera paused, seeing the confusion on Colonial faces. You don't know what hyperspace is, do you? We use FTL drives, Gaeta explained. Faster than light jump technology. Instantaneous travel calculated by computer, no preset routes required. Hera and Chopper exchanged looks. The droid beeped something incredulous. That's not how physics works, Hera stammered. You can't just jump anywhere without hyperspace lanes. The gravitational shear would, and yet we do it, Ty growled. Which means we can jump out of here right now if we knew where to go. Give us coordinates. It doesn't work like that. Hyperspace coordinates won't. Then translate them, Adama commanded. Lieutenant Gaeta, work with their navigation systems. Find a way to convert their coordinates into something our FTL drives can use. On the Dratus display, the Imperial formation drew closer. Minutes, not hours. Starbuck stepped forward. Old man, we can buy time. Hit and fade tactics draw those TIEs away from the fleet. Give Gaeta the hours he needs. Adama looked at his son, at Starbuck, at the 61 Viper pilots who would follow orders into hell itself. Then at Roslin, who gave the smallest nod. Launch all Vipers, coordinate with Phoenix Squadron. And Captain Syndulla, welcome to the Colonial Fleet. Pray your people's faith in rebellion is stronger than the Empire's guns. The thing that disturbed Admiral Adama most wasn't the energy weapons or the alien ship designs, or even the incomprehensible hyperspace technology. It was the droids. They were everywhere aboard the Ghost when Gaeta and a small colonial technical team transferred over to coordinate navigation. A battered astromech unit that Hera called Chopper rolled through corridors with apparent autonomy, its dome swiveling to track the colonial officers with what could only be described as suspicion. In the cockpit, protocol droids interfaced with ship systems, their vocabulators producing speech that the translation matrix rendered into barely comprehensible colonial standard. Gaeta tried to hide his discomfort. He failed. Your droids, he asked carefully, watching Chopper manipulate the navigation console with mechanical appendages. They're fully autonomous? Self-aware? Hera glanced up from her pilot station, confused by the question. Of course. Chopper's been my co-pilot for years. Why? No reason, Gaeta lied, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. Every colonial knew the history. Artificial intelligence, created to serve humanity, evolving beyond its programming, turning on its creators. The Cylons had looked human by the end, but they'd started as machines. Machines just like these. Aboard Galactica, the same conversation was occurring in the CIC, but with less diplomatic restraint. They're toasters, Colonel Ty spat, staring at the tactical feed showing rebel ships swarming with droid crew. Machines with intelligence. After everything the Cylons did, these people trust their lives to walking computers? Different galaxy, a different history, President Roslin said quietly, though her own expression showed discomfort. Perhaps their machines never rebelled. Or perhaps they don't know they're living on borrowed time. Adama raised a hand for silence. Our opinions on their technology don't matter right now. What matters is whether we can work with them long enough to escape this Imperial Fleet. The Dratus display showed the tactical situation deteriorating. The Relentless had closed to engagement range, its turbolaser batteries within firing solution of the civilian fleet. Viper squadrons and Phoenix squadrons' X-Wings danced between the Star Destroyer and its TIE fighter screen, buying precious minutes with their lives. Galactica. Actual. Apollo. Lee's voice crackled through the wireless, strain evident. They've got us outnumbered 3-1. And these TIE fighters are faster than Raiders, and those energy weapons are cooking through our armor. We need to withdraw. Negative, Apollo. Hold the line. Gaeta needs more time. On the Ghost, that time was running out in a different way. Gaeta stared at the Rebel navigation computer, his frustration mounting. This doesn't make sense. Your hyperspace routes follow predetermined pathways through subspace. Our FTL drives calculate jump coordinates through normal space-time. They're not compatible. Hera worked her controls, pulling up star charts. Then we need to find common reference points. Give me your emergency jump coordinates, wherever your damaged FTL took you from. Gaeta rattled off numbers. Hera's expression shifted from confusion to shock. That's impossible. Those coordinates would place your origin point outside the known galaxy, beyond the outer rim, past wild space, in a region we've never even surveyed. We're not from your galaxy, Gaeta said flatly. We're from somewhere else entirely. Another reality, another universe. I don't know the terminology, but our star charts don't match yours because our stars don't exist here. Chopper beeped something that sounded distinctly pessimistic. Hera silenced the droid with a gesture, her pilot's mind already working the problem. If you can jump anywhere without hyperspace lanes, can you follow a ship in hyperspace? Track its trajectory and match it with your FTL? In theory, yes. We've shadowed Cylon base stars through FTL jumps before. But we'd need precise vector data, and we can provide that, Hera interrupted. Mina, my ship jumps to the Rebel base. Your Galactica's sensors track our hyperspace entry vector, calculate the destination, and your FTL drives jump directly there. It's insane, but it might work. Gaeta felt hope and terror in equal measure. And if the calculations are wrong? Then you end up somewhere else, possibly inside a planet, possibly scattered across 1,000 light-years. Hera met his eyes. But staying here guarantees the Empire destroys your fleet. So what's it going to be? Back on Galactica, a different crisis was unfolding. Dr. Gaius Balter stood in his laboratory, staring at biological samples extracted from the Rebel pilot's medical scan. Beside him, visible only to Balter, Number 6 smiled with predatory satisfaction. Look at the cellular structure, Gaius, the Cylon model whispered. Midi-chlorians, microscopic organisms that don't exist in colonial biology. These people have a symbiotic relationship with what they call the Force, an energy field that permeates their entire galaxy. Balter's hands trembled as he manipulated the data. And we have none of these organisms. We're invisible to this force. Or immune to it, 6 purred. Imagine the possibilities. A galaxy where mystical powers can influence weak minds, see the future, manipulate matter itself. And the Colonial Fleet exists outside all of it. Unpredictable. Uncontrollable. Or targets, Baltar muttered. If these Force users can't sense us, can't predict us, we become threats to the natural order. Before Six could respond, the wireless crackled. All hands, brace for impact. Incoming fire. The Relentless had opened fire. Saw turbolaser bolts, massive energy weapons that made the Cylon's arsenal look primitive, streaked across space. One caught a civilian freighter, the ship evaporating in a flash of superheated plasma. Another missed Galactica by meters, close enough that the electromagnetic pulse scrambled systems across 3 decks. "Return fire," Adama commanded. "All batteries, target that Star Destroyer's bridge tower." Galactica's main guns thundered, kinetic rounds and conventional missiles crossing the distance. They struck the Star Destroyer's shields and stopped. Energy barriers invisible to Colonial sensors absorbed the impact, dissipating kinetic energy into harmless radiation. "Weapons ineffective, sir," Tuala reported, disbelief in her voice. "They have some kind of defensive screen. Our ordnance isn't penetrating." Tai swore viciously. "We're shooting spitballs at a fortress." Then, Gaeta's voice burst through the wireless from the Ghost. "Admiral, we have a solution. It's risky, but the rebel ship can lead us out. You'll need to track our hyperspace vector and jump simultaneously." "Simultaneously?" Adama's voice sharpened. "Lieutenant, if we're off by even a fraction, I know, sir, but there's no alternative. The Empire's weapons are too advanced." President Roslin stepped beside Adama. "Admiral, we're out of options." Adama stared at the tactical display. The Relentless. The TIE fighters. The burning wreckage of Colonial Vipers and Rebel X-Wings. 50,000 people waiting for orders. "Recall all Vipers. Prepare the fleet for emergency jump." He paused. "And somebody find out what the frack of Force is." The decision wasn't Adama's to make alone, not this one. President Roslin convened an emergency quorum session aboard Colonial 1, the former luxury liner that now served as the fleet's seat of government. The delegates from the surviving colonies, Caprica, Geminon, Pecan, what remained of them, crowded into the conference room with fear and exhaustion etched on their faces. "Let me understand this correctly," Representative Sarah Porter of Geminon said, her voice tight. "You want us to follow complete strangers to a hidden base using technology we don't understand, in a galaxy where we don't belong?" "The alternative is staying here to be destroyed by the Empire," Roslin replied evenly. "Governor Price has made it clear through her actions that she considers us hostile. We've already lost the freighter Adriatic and 12 Vipers. Those are deaths we can't afford." "But allying with these rebels?" Tom Zarek leaned forward, his political instincts sharp despite exhaustion. "We know nothing about their cause. For all we know, they're terrorists, criminals. The Empire might have legitimate grievances." "The Empire vaporized a civilian vessel without warning," Adama interjected from his position by the viewport. "That tells me everything I need to know about their legitimacy." "Or it tells you they're fighting a war, and we stumbled into the crossfire," Zarek countered. "Admiral, I respect your military judgment, but we can't afford to pick sides based on one engagement. What if the Empire offers us better terms? Resources, protection, a place for our people to settle?" The room erupted in argument. Adama let it wash over him, his mind already 13 steps ahead. He'd commanded in wartime long enough to recognize the pattern. Desperation made people cling to any hope, even false ones. The Empire's offer would come. It always did. The question was whether they'd survive long enough to hear it. His question was answered when Duwala's voice crackled through his wireless. "Admiral, we're being hailed. Imperial frequency. They're requesting direct communication with fleet leadership." Roslin met Adama's eyes across the conference table. "Put it through." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a woman in an Imperial uniform, gray, precise, projecting authority through every gesture. Governor Arihinda Price of Lothal, the intelligence brief from Hera, had identified her. Cold eyes, politician smile, the bearing of someone accustomed to power. "I am Governor Price of the Galactic Empire. You have entered Imperial space and engaged our forces. Surrender immediately, and you will be treated as refugees under Imperial law. Resist, and you will be classified as enemy combatants and destroyed. This is President Laura Roslin of the Colonies. We are civilians fleeing our own war. We have no interest in your conflict. Grant us safe passage, and we will leave this system peacefully. Price's smile didn't reach her eyes. I'm afraid that's not possible. Your vessels employ technology we've never encountered. Your weapon systems, propulsion drives, and navigational capabilities represent potential threats to Imperial security. You will surrender your ships for inspection, and your people will be processed at Imperial facilities. Processed? Roslin's voice dropped to ice. That sounds remarkably like imprisonment. Oh, Governor. That sounds like prudent security measures, Madam President. The Empire has enemies who would exploit any advantage. Your technology could tip the balance of power in this sector. Price leaned forward slightly. However, the Empire also rewards cooperation. Agree to share your FTL technology, place your military assets under Imperial command, and we can offer you resettlement, protection, a future. In the silence that followed, Adama watched the Quorum delegates' faces. Some showed hope, others fear. Zarek wore calculated interest. He saw opportunity in the Empire's offer. You're asking us to become Imperial subjects, Adama stated. I'm offering you survival, Admiral. The Rebel Alliance promises freedom but delivers only death and chaos. The Empire provides order, stability, everything your refugee fleet desperately needs. Roslin stood, her presence filling the screen. And what would this resettlement look like, Governor? Would our people remain together? Would we maintain our government, our laws, our autonomy? Details to be negotiated. But I assure you the Emperor is generous to those who serve him faithfully. The wireless crackled with a new voice, Harrison Dula, transmitting from the Ghost on a pirate frequency. Don't believe her. The Empire conquered my homeworld with those same promises. Now Ryloth is strip-mined for resources and my people are slaves. Everything they offer is chains wrapped in silk. Price's expression hardened. Ah, Captain Syndulla, still spreading your terrorist propaganda, I see. Your presence here explains much. Her attention returned to Roslin. Madam President, you have 1 hour to decide. Surrender or be destroyed. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. The Quorum exploded into debate. Zarek immediately pushed for accepting Imperial terms. Porter argued for negotiating concessions. Others demanded they flee with the rebels regardless of risk. Through it all, Adama remained silent, watching Roslin navigate the political storm. Finally, the president raised her hand for silence. We're going to put it to a vote. The Quorum will decide whether we accept Imperial protection or follow the Rebel Alliance to their base. And if the vote splits, Zarek asked. Then I'll cast the deciding vote as Fleet Commander-in-Chief. Roslin's jaw set. But I want every voice heard first. This isn't just military strategy. And this is choosing what kind of people we want to be in this new galaxy. The debate raged for 37 minutes. Colonial democracy at its most raw, survivors of genocide arguing about survival versus principle, security versus freedom, pragmatism versus idealism. Adama had seen it before, after the Cylon attacks. Fear made people desperate. Desperation made them dangerous. The vote came down to a single delegate. Representative Eladio Puasha of Pecan cast the deciding ballot, his voice barely a whisper. I vote we follow the rebels. My family didn't survive the Cylons just to trade one master for another. The Quorum chamber fell silent. Roslin nodded slowly. The Quorum has decided. Admiral Adama, prepare the fleet for departure. We're going with the rebels. Zarek stood, his face dark with fury. This is a mistake. When the Empire hunts us down, when our people starve because we rejected their offer, remember this moment. Remember who chose pride over survival. He stalked from the chamber, several delegates following. Roslin watched them go, exhaustion finally showing through her composure. Did we just make the right choice? She asked quietly. We made a choice, Adama replied. Now we live with it, or die with it. His wireless crackled. Admiral, this is Gaida. The Ghost is preparing to jump. We need Galactica ready in 3 minutes. 3 minutes to coordinate 61 Vipers, 30 civilian ships, and 1 battered Battlestar. 3 minutes to track a hyperspace vector using technology they barely understood. 3 minutes to jump blindly into unknown space following allies they'd known for less than 6 hours. Adama returned to Galactica's CIC and gave the order that would define their future in this galaxy. All ships, prepare for jump, and may the gods watch over us. The jump should have been impossible. Hera Syndulla's ghost vanished into hyperspace, its departure a brief flash of pseudo-motion as the ship stretched and disappeared into a dimension the Colonials couldn't perceive. On Galactica's Duradis, Duala tracked the impossible, a ship that ceased to exist in normal space but left a faint gravitational wake, a disturbance in space-time that their sensors could barely detect. "I've got the vector," she called out, fingers dancing across her console. "Transmitting to navigation now." Gaida's hands moved with desperate precision, translating the hyperspace trajectory into FTL coordinates. The mathematics were wrong. Hyperspace operated on principles that violated colonial understanding of physics, but the destination point could be calculated. Probably. Maybe. "Coordinates locked," Gaida announced, his voice betraying none of his terror. "Jump solution in 30 seconds. All civilian vessels report ready," Duala added. "Viper squadrons recovered. Fleet is ready for jump." Adama stood at the center of the CIC, surrounded by officers who'd followed him through hell. One more impossible decision, one more leap of faith. Execute jump, all ships. Reality twisted. The Colonial Fleet ceased to exist in one location and resumed being in another, instantaneous travel through space-time that defied causality. For the Colonials, it was routine. For the Star Wars galaxy, it should have been impossible. They emerged in chaos. The Rebel base wasn't a planet or a space station. It was a fleet. Dozens of ships clustered in the shadow of a massive gas giant, hiding in the electromagnetic interference of the planet's magnetic field. Amon Calamari cruisers, Corellian corvettes, ancient Hammerhead-class ships held together by faith and stubbornness. And now, impossibly, a colonial refugee fleet that had traveled using technology the rebels didn't understand. "Frack me," Starbuck muttered from her Viper's cockpit. "They live like this, running and hiding?" "Sounds familiar," Apollo responded dryly. On the rebel command ship, Home 1, General Jan Dodonna stared at the sensor returns with a mixture of amazement and alarm. "Confirm those readings. They jumped into our hidden base without hyperspace coordinates?" "Confirmed, General," his sensor officer reported. "They tracked Captain Syndulla's hyperspace vector and translated it somehow. Their drives operate on completely different principles." "Get me Captain Syndulla. On now." Hera's hologram materialized above the tactical display, her exhaustion evident even through the blue projection. "General, the Colonial Fleet is requesting permission to dock for repairs. Their FTL drive sustained damage, and they've suffered casualties. They need help." "And they brought the Empire's attention with them," Dodonna said sharply. "How long before Governor Price triangulates our position based on their departure vector?" "Unknown, sir. But Admiral Adama has information you need to hear. Their technology could change everything." Aboard Galactica, Adama received a formal invitation to meet the rebel leadership aboard Home 1. He brought President Roslin, Colonel Ty, and against his better judgment, Dr. Balter. If they were negotiating for the fleet's future, they needed their best political minds. Even the ones Adama personally despised. The shuttle ride to the Mon Calamari cruiser gave them their first real look at the rebel fleet. Ships in desperate condition, hulls scarred by battle damage, repairs visible as patches of mismatched armor. Pilots younger than they should be. The haunted expressions of people who'd been fighting a losing war for too long. "They look like us," Roslin observed quietly. "They are us," Ty growled. Desperate, outgunned, and running on borrowed time. The conference room aboard Home 1 was crowded with rebel leadership. General Dodonna, severe and tactical. Mon Mothma, elegant and determined. Hera Syndulla. And others, military officers, pilots, intelligence operatives, all watching the Colonials with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Mon Mothma spoke first, her voice carrying authority despite her slim frame. "Admiral Adama, President Roslin. Welcome to the Rebel Alliance. We understand you come from far beyond our galaxy. Beyond your galaxy, beyond your reality, if our scientists are correct, Roslin replied. We're as surprised to be here as you are to have us. Your technology is remarkable, Dodonna interjected. Jump drives that require no hyperspace lanes, kinetic weapons that bypass conventional shields, ships built to survive sustained combat. The Empire has nothing like it. Adama's expression remained neutral. You're wondering if we'll share that technology. I'm wondering if you'll fight, Dodonna said bluntly. The rebellion needs every advantage. Your Battlestar alone could tip the balance in a dozen systems. Our Battlestar needs repairs, Adama countered. Our people need rest. We've been running from the Cylons for months. We didn't come here to join another war. You joined the moment you destroyed those TIE fighters, Mon Mothma said, not unkindly. The Empire doesn't forgive. Governor Price will hunt you across the galaxy if she must. Balter leaned forward, his voice smooth. Then perhaps we should reconsider the Empire's offer. They promised protection, resources. They promised slavery, Hera interrupted sharply. Dressed in fancy words, but slavery nonetheless. The Empire will take your ships, study your technology, and discard your people when they're no longer useful. And what does the rebellion offer? Ty demanded. More running? More hiding? We offer freedom, Mon Mothma stated. The chance to stand against tyranny. And yes, risk. But at least the risk is chosen, not imposed. Roslin studied the rebel leader thoughtfully. You're losing this war, aren't you? The silence that followed was answer enough. The Emperor controls most of the galaxy, Dodonna admitted. We win individual battles, but we're bleeding resources we can't replace. Every ship lost, every pilot killed, brings us closer to extinction. He paused. But we keep fighting because the alternative is accepting the Empire's order. And some things are worth dying for. Adama recognized that conviction. He'd carried it through the Cylon War, through the destruction of the colonies, through every impossible decision since. The willingness to fight when logic said surrender. The refusal to accept defeat even when victory seemed impossible. We'll need time to make repairs, he said finally. Yes, and we'll need to understand this galaxy better before we commit to anything. But if the Empire comes for us here, he met Dodonna's eyes. We'll fight, not for your cause, for our people. Mon Mothma nodded slowly. That's all we ask, Admiral. That, and perhaps someday, when you understand what we're fighting for, you'll choose to stand with us willingly. In the viewport beyond, the Colonial Fleet and Rebel Alliance hung in space together. Two groups of refugees, two lost causes, finding each other in the darkness between stars. Neither yet realized how much they would need each other in the battles to come. The tylium crisis hit on day 3. Chief Galen Tyrell stood in Galactica's fuel processing center, staring at readouts that told a story no one wanted to hear. Beside him, Lieutenant Felix Gaeta cross-referenced numbers with growing alarm. 18% remaining, Tyrell said flatly. At current consumption rates, we've got maybe 2 more jumps. 3, if we're lucky. And the civilian fleet? Gaeta asked. Worse, half the ships are running on fumes. The mining vessel Daru Mozu is already dead in space. They burned their last reserves getting here. Gaeta rubbed his eyes. Can we refine local fuel sources? The rebels use something called hypermatter and Tabana gas for their ships. I've been looking at their fuel specs. It's like trying to run a combustion engine on electricity. And our tylium refineries are designed for a specific molecular structure that doesn't exist in this galaxy. Tyrell's jaw tightened. We're stranded, Lieutenant. Without tylium, the fleet doesn't move. The news hit the senior staff like a kinetic round. Adama convened an emergency meeting in the wardroom. Ty, Roslin, Balter, and now by necessity, several rebel representatives including Hera Syndulla and a rebel engineer named Quorum. Show them, Adama ordered. Tyrell brought up the fuel consumption data. The curve was unmistakable, a downward slope that terminated in 0 within days. Quorum studied the information, his aged features thoughtful. Your FTL drives operate by temporarily shifting the ship out of normal spacetime. The energy requirements are substantial. Tylium provides that energy, Tyrell explained. It's a refined fuel source unique to our region of space. We've surveyed this system. There's nothing even close to tylium here. Then you need to adapt, Quarry said simply. Your drives fundamentally manipulate space-time. That's incredibly advanced technology. There must be a way to modify them to accept alternative power sources. Modify century-old drive systems we barely understand? Ty's voice dripped skepticism. Sure, why not? While we're at it, let's rebuild the fleet from scratch. We don't have a choice, Colonel, Roslin interjected quietly. If we can't move, we're sitting targets. The Empire will find us eventually. Balter leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. What about your hypermatter? Could we convert hyperdrive technology to work with our FTL systems? Absolutely not, Quarry responded immediately. Hypermatter operates through extra-dimensional access to hyperspace. Your FTL drives function on completely incompatible principles. Mixing the technologies would be catastrophic. So we're trapped, Ty stated. The silence stretched until Hera spoke. Not necessarily. The Rebellion has access to old Republic research stations, facilities that experimented with unconventional propulsion systems before the Empire shut them down. If anyone has information on alternative FTL methods, it would be there. How far? Adama asked. 2 hyperspace jumps, but the station is in Imperial-controlled space. We'd need to fight our way in and out. With what fuel? Ty demanded. We can't jump there and back. We'd be stranded in enemy territory. Then we send a strike team, Starbuck's voice came from the doorway. She'd been listening. Are unauthorized but unchallenged. Raptors have enough fuel for multiple jumps. Small team, in and out, grab the data. Adama considered. Captain Syndulla, would your people support this operation? We'd lead it, Hera confirmed. But we'll need colonial pilots who understand your FTL technology. Someone who can identify useful research. All eyes turned to Gaeta. The lieutenant looked like he wanted to refuse, but duty won. I'll go. So will I, Starbuck added. Denied, Adama said immediately. Old man. I need you here, Captain. Lee will lead the colonial contingent. Before Starbuck could argue, klaxons screamed throughout Galactica. Duala's voice crackled over the wireless. Contacts. Multiple Imperial signatures dropping from hyperspace. It's a fleet. The CIC erupted in controlled chaos. Yadratus showed the impossible. 5 Star Destroyers emerging at the system's edge, accompanied by dozens of support vessels. At their center, something larger. A Superstar Destroyer, its wedge-shaped hull dwarfing everything around it. How did they find us? Roslin demanded. They tracked the colonial jump signature, Hera said, her voice hollow. Your FTL drives leave a different kind of spatial distortion than hyperspace. The Empire's been hunting for new technologies. They must have developed sensors specifically for your signature. Admiral, we're being hailed, Duala reported. Imperial command frequency. It's Governor Price. The view screen activated. Price stood on the bridge of the Superstar Destroyer, her expression triumphant. Admiral Adama, President Roslin, I warned you that resistance would be classified as enemy action. You chose poorly. Behind her, the bridge hummed with activity. Surrender the Colonial Fleet immediately. Your ships will be seized, your technology analyzed, and your people processed. This is your final opportunity for clemency. And if we refuse, Roslin asked, though she already knew, then I will demonstrate why the Empire rules the galaxy unopposed. Price gestured, and the tactical display behind her showed Galactica surrounded. You have no fuel to run, no allies to save you, and now, no choices left. Adama stared at the screen, calculating odds that didn't exist. 5 Star Destroyers, 1 battered Battlestar, Vipers with limited ammunition, and an FTL drive that couldn't take them anywhere. You have 1 hour to decide, Price stated. After that, we open fire. The transmission ended. In the terrible silence that followed, Yitai spoke what everyone was thinking. We're fragged. Adama turned to his officers, his expression carved from stone. Get me every department head, every pilot, every engineer who can hold a wrench, and someone find me a miracle. Because if we're going down, we're taking as many Imperial ships with us as we can. In his laboratory, Balter stared at equations that refused to resolve. Number 6 appeared beside him, her voice a purr. You see it now, don't you, Gaius? The only way forward. We can't, Balter whispered. The nuclear arsenal. If we use it, then the Empire learns what colonial fury looks like. And perhaps, just perhaps, they'll think twice before hunting you. Balter's hands trembled over the launch protocols. 1 hour, 50,000 lives, and a decision that would define whether the Colonial Fleet died with honor or desperation. Outside, the Imperial Fleet waited with the patience of predators who knew their prey had nowhere left to run. The Viper Bay was chaos incarnate. Pilots scrambling into flight suits, deck crews hauling ordnance, Chief Tyrol bellowing orders over the roar of engines. Starbuck watched from the catwalk, her hands gripping the railing hard enough to hurt. We're going to die here, Sharon Boomer Valeri said quietly beside her. Aren't we? Probably, Starbuck replied, but we'll make them bleed for it. Below, Vipers were being armed with the last of their kinetic rounds. 61 fighters against an Imperial fleet. The math was brutal. The resolve was absolute. In the CIC, Adama studied the tactical situation with Colonel Tig. The Imperial fleet had formed a blockade perimeter. Star Destroyers positioned to cover all escape vectors. Textbook encirclement, professional, lethal. Their formation has one weakness, Ty observed, or pointing to the display. They're relying on overlapping fire zones. If we could punch through the gap between those two destroyers, with what? Adama interrupted. We've already seen our weapons can't penetrate their shields, and we don't have fuel for a jump. Then we use what they don't expect. Ty's voice dropped. The nukes. Adama's jaw tightened. The nuclear arsenal was their last resort, held in reserve since the fall of the colonies. Weapons of genocide, kept as insurance against the Cylons finding them. Using them here meant crossing a line. If we deploy nuclear weapons, we become what the Empire claims we are, President Roslin said, entering the CIC. Terrorists, murderers. We become survivors, Ty countered. Madam President, with respect, this isn't the time for moral philosophy. Those Star Destroyers will glass every civilian ship in our fleet. I'd rather be called a terrorist than watch 50,000 people die. Roslin turned to Adama. Admiral? Before Adama could answer, Harrison Dula burst into the CIC, chopper, rolling frantically behind her. We have an idea. It's insane, but it might work. I'm listening, Adama said. Your FTL drives can jump without hyperspace lanes, meaning you can calculate vectors in real time. The Empire's formations assume predictable hyperspace exit points. What if Galactica jumped inside their formation? Point-blank range, hitting them before they could react. Gaida pulled up calculations. That's theoretically possible. But we'd be jumping blind into a space filled with massive gravity wells. The margin for error is non-existent. And we don't have fuel for multiple jumps, Tyrol added over the wireless. One jump, maybe. Then we're dead in space. One jump is all we need, Hera insisted. Your Battlestar materializes between two Star Destroyers, unloads everything you have at point-blank range, then the Rebel fleet attacks while the Empire's in disarray. We coordinate the assault for maximum impact. Maximum suicide, you mean? Ty growled. It's our only shot, Hera pressed. Unless you have a better idea? The CIC fell silent. Roslin looked at the tactical display, at the colonial ships clustered like frightened children, at the Imperial blockade that promised annihilation. Do it, she said quietly. But Admiral, no nuclear weapons. Not unless we have absolutely no other choice. We left the colonies as victims. I won't have us remembered as monsters. Adama nodded slowly. Condition 1 throughout the ship. All batteries prepare for close-range engagement, and somebody get me President Mothma. We're going to need every rebel ship in this system. 30 minutes later, the plan had crystallized into desperate action. Galactica would jump into the heart of the Imperial formation. The Rebel fleet would attack simultaneously from the flanks. Colonial Vipers and Rebel X-Wings would target Imperial TIE fighter screens. It was audacious, suicidal, and completely unlike any tactic the Empire would anticipate. Starbuck climbed into her Viper's cockpit, running through pre-flight checks with muscle memory. Around her, pilots did the same, young faces trying not to show fear. veterans hiding exhaustion behind professionalism. Lee's Viper rolled into position beside hers. Kara, his voice was soft over the wireless. If we don't make it, we'll make it, she interrupted. We always do. This time's different. Every time's different. We fly anyway. In his laboratory, Baltar accessed the nuclear launch systems, his fingers hovering over the authorization codes. Number 6 stood behind him, her presence both comfort and temptation. You could end this, she whispered. One warhead detonated at the center of their formation. The electromagnetic pulse would disable their shields, their computers, their coordinated tactics. Galactica could escape. And irradiate the entire system, Baltar muttered. Due many survivors to slow death from radiation poisoning. Better than certain death right now. Baltar's hands shook. The codes were right there. Launch authorization was his to give. One decision, one button, one chance to be the savior he'd never been brave enough to become. He pulled his hand away. Not yet. Let Adama try his way first. Aboard the Star Destroyer, Governor Price watched her chronometer count down. Status? The Colonial Fleet remains in position, Governor, her tactical officer reported. No movement, no communications. They're going to surrender, Price said with satisfaction. Bring weapons online. If they don't respond in 10 minutes, destroy one civilian ship as demonstration. Let them watch someone die because of their pride. Her sensor officer suddenly stiffened. Governor, energy spike from the Colonial Battlestar. It's... Galactica vanished and reappeared 300 meters off the Star Destroyer's port bow. The Battlestar's main batteries opened fire at point-blank range, kinetic rounds and missiles hammering into shields that weren't designed to repel attacks from inside the formation. Simultaneously, the rebel fleet dropped from hyperspace, Mon Calamari cruisers and corvettes pouring fire into the suddenly disorganized Imperial formation. Vipers and X-Wings swarmed through the chaos, engaging TIE fighters in a knife fight that turned space into a storm of weapons fire and exploding craft. Starbuck's targeting computer screamed as she dove through a formation of TIS, her guns blazing. Apollo flew her wing, the two of them moving with synchronization born from years of flying together. Around them, Colonial and Rebel pilots learned to fight side by side in real time. On Galactica's CYC, Adama watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. All batteries, continuous fire. Target their shield generators. The gamble had worked. For now, the universe became fire. Galactica's hull shuddered as turbolaser fire from 3 Star Destroyers converged on her position. The Battlestar's armor, designed to survive nuclear blasts, held, but barely. Entire sections depressurized, bulkheads collapsed, and damage control teams raced through smoke-filled corridors dragging wounded to sickbay. Forward batteries offline, Duala shouted over the cacophony. Hull breaches on deck 7 through 12. Casualty reports coming in from all sections. Keep firing, Adama commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Concentrate on that Star Destroyer's bridge tower. Galactica's main guns thundered, pouring kinetic rounds into the Star Destroyer at point-blank range. At this distance, even Imperial shields couldn't fully disperse the kinetic energy. Armor plating shattered, our superstructure buckled, and secondary explosions rippled across the massive vessel's hull. But it wasn't enough. Admiral, shields are adapting, Gata reported, his console alive with data. They're modulating frequencies to deflect our kinetic rounds, effectiveness dropping to 40%. Governor Price's voice cut through the tactical channel, transmitted fleet-wide. All Imperial vessels, concentrate fire on the Colonial Battlestar. I want that ship destroyed now. 5 Star Destroyers turned as one, their weapons batteries glowing with gathered energy. Galactica was tough, but even she couldn't survive concentrated fire from that much firepower. In the Viper Bay, Chief Tyrell watched structural indicators flash red across his screens. She won't take another salvo like that. The old girl's giving everything she's got. But there's limits. Starbuck's voice crackled over the wireless. Then we don't give them another salvo. All Vipers, attack pattern Omega. Target those Star Destroyer shield generators. 61 Colonial Vipers, joined by 30 Rebel X-Wings and A-Wings, dove toward the Imperial capital ships. It was madness, Small craft attacking vessels thousands of times their mass, but madness was all they had left. Apollo's targeting computer locked onto a shield generator dome. Omega pattern, confirm. Break by pairs on my mark. 3, 2, mark. The fighter formation shattered into individual attack runs, each pilot choosing their own vector through the storm of point defense fire. Energy bolts and flak-filled space, and Vipers began dying. Colonial call signs disappeared from Dratus one by one. Crashdown, hot dog, erase track, pilot Starbuck had flown with for years, reduced to expanding clouds of debris. This is Boomer, I'm hit, systems failing. Sharon Valeri's Viper tumbled through space, trailing atmosphere and fuel. An X-Wing swooped in, its pilot, Wedge Antilles, providing cover fire as Boomer struggled for control. Stay with me, Boomer, Wedge's voice was steady. Get to the retrieval point, we'll cover you. Starbuck dove through the gap Wedge had created, her weapons locked on a Star Destroyer's shield generator. Kinetic rounds hammered the installation, and for one glorious moment, she saw the shields flicker. Then TIE fighters swarmed her position, and she was fighting for her life, muscle memory and fury keeping her alive through turns that would have killed lesser pilots. Aboard the Rebel command ship Home 1, Mon Mothma watched the battle with clinical horror. General Dodonna, our casualties are mounting. We're losing ships we cannot replace. The Colonials are taking the worst of it, Dodonna replied grimly. That Battlestar is absorbing fire that would have destroyed our cruisers. They're buying us time. Time for what? We can't win this battle. Dodonna's expression was stone. Then we make sure their sacrifice means something. All ships, target the damaged Star Destroyer. Concentrate fire. Bring it down. Mon Calamari cruisers and Corellian corvettes poured turbolaser fire into the Star Destroyer that Galactica had already wounded. Its shields, weakened by the Battlestar's assault, collapsed under the combined barrage. Explosions rippled through the Imperial vessel's superstructure, or secondary detonations cascading until the entire ship broke apart in a brilliant explosion. 1 Star Destroyer down, 4 remaining, and the Super Star Destroyer still intact. On Galactica's CIC, Ty grabbed Adama's arm. Bill, we need to jump. Now. The FTL drives have enough power for one more emergency jump. If we stay, we die. And abandon the Rebel fleet? Adama's voice was ice. They attacked with us. We don't leave allies behind. They're not our allies. They're strangers we met 3 days ago. Our responsibility is to the 50,000 people in this fleet, not to some rebellion that's been losing its war for years. Adama stared at his oldest friend, the man who'd stood beside him through decades of service. If we run now, what does that make us? The Empire will slaughter the Rebel fleet. Those deaths will be on us. Those deaths are on them for starting this fight. Bill, you can't save everyone. Sometimes you have to choose survival over honor. In his laboratory, Balter heard the argument over the wireless. His hands moved across the nuclear launch console, authorization codes already entered. 1 command, 1 warhead, 1 chance to end this. Number 6 stood beside him, her voice urgent. Do it, Gaius. Save them. Be the hero you've always wanted to be. Heroes don't use nuclear weapons, Balter whispered. Heroes do whatever it takes to protect their people. The launch authorization glowed on his screen. Balter's finger hovered over the execute command. Around him, Galactica shuddered under another turbolaser barrage. People were dying. The fleet was dying. He pressed the button. US nuclear launch detected. Tuala's voice was shock and horror. Single warhead, trajectory toward the Super Star Destroyer. Belay that launch, Adama roared. Who authorized? It's already away, sir. Impact in 40 seconds. The tactical display showed the missile's path, a brilliant trajectory toward the heart of the Imperial formation. Governor Price's face appeared on the view screen, her composure cracking. Point defenses, intercept that missile, now! TIE fighters swarmed the warhead. Turbolaser batteries tracked it. But the missile had been launched at point-blank range, and colonial nuclear weapons were designed to survive exactly this kind of interception. Ablative armor, evasive maneuvering, shielded warhead, all the lessons learned from fighting Cylons. The warhead reached the Super Star Destroyer's shields, and detonated. Or the electromagnetic pulse washed across the Imperial formation like the wrath of angry gods. Shields collapsed. Computer systems crashed. Targeting solutions dissolved into static. For one perfect moment, the Empire's technological superiority meant nothing. "All batteries, fire!" Adama commanded. Galactica's guns spoke with renewed fury, joined by every rebel ship in the system. Kinetic rounds and turbolaser fire hammered unshielded Imperial hulls. 2 more Star Destroyers broke apart under the assault, their reactors detonating in cascading explosions. The Super Star Destroyer, its systems crippled, began a slow, tumbling spin. On its bridge, Governor Price screamed orders that no one could execute. The massive vessel, caught in the gas giant's gravity well without functioning engines, it began its inevitable fall toward the planet's crushing atmosphere. The remaining Imperial ships broke formation, their commanders recognizing defeat. They jumped to hyperspace in desperate retreat, leaving wreckage and dying ships behind. The battle of the gas giant was over. Galactica hung in space, her hull scored and bleeding atmosphere but alive. Around her, the rebel fleet counted their losses. 8 ships destroyed, dozens damaged, hundreds of casualties. The Colonial Fleet had lost 23 Vipers and 2 civilian vessels. But they had survived. In his laboratory, Baltar stared at his hands, realizing what he'd done. What he'd become. And in the CIC, Admiral Adama turned to find whoever had launched that warhead, his expression promising consequences that would echo through the fleet. The brig was cold, sterile, and utterly silent except for the hum of Galactica's damaged life support systems. Dr. Gaius Baltar sat on the metal bench, his hands still trembling 12 hours after the battle. Across from him, Admiral Adama stood with the stillness of a statue, his expression unreadable. "Why?" Adama's voice was quiet, which was somehow worse than if he'd shouted. "Because we were dying," Baltar replied, his usual eloquence stripped away by exhaustion. "Because your honor was about to get 50,000 people killed. Because someone had to make the hard choice. The choice to use weapons of mass destruction without authorization? To irradiate an entire star system? To become exactly what the Cylons accused us of being?" Adama's jaw tightened. "You launched a nuclear warhead, Doctor. In any functional military, that's treason. In any functional military, the commanding officer wouldn't sacrifice his fleet for strangers," Baltar shot back, finding some remnant of defiance. "You were going to let us die rather than do what was necessary. I saved us." "You started something we can't finish," Adama countered. "The Empire now knows we possess nuclear weapons. They'll classify us as an existential threat. Every Imperial vessel in this galaxy will be hunting us. You didn't save the fleet, Doctor. You put a target on our backs that will never come off." The silence stretched between them until Colonel Tigh entered, his face grim. "Bill, the Quorum's demanding answers. Half of them want Baltar executed. The other half want him decorated." Adama turned away from the cell. "What does President Roslin say?" "She's waiting in your quarters. And the rebels want to talk about what comes next." In Adama's quarters, the senior leadership had assembled. President Roslin sat at the table, her exhaustion evident. Beside her, Mon Mothma and General Dodonna represented the rebellion. The tension was palpable. "The Empire will retaliate," Mon Mothma stated without preamble. "Governor Price is dead, along with her entire fleet, but the Emperor doesn't forgive such losses. He'll send everything he has to destroy both our fleets." "Then we need to move," Dodonna added. "Immediately, before they can organize a response." "To where?" Roslin asked. "We still don't have fuel. Our FTL drives used the last of our tylium reserves in that emergency jump. We're stranded." "Not stranded," Gaeta interjected from his position by the wall. "During the battle, I transmitted our FTL drive specifications to the Rebel research team. They've been analyzing the data. Captain Syndulla?" Hera stepped forward, a datapad in hand. "Your FTL technology is remarkable, but it's also adaptable. We believe we can modify your drives to accept a hybrid fuel source, combining elements of hypermatter with a synthetic tylium analog we can manufacture. It won't be as efficient as pure tylium, but it'll keep your fleet mobile." "How long?" Adama asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we encounter complications. Hera met his eyes. But Admiral, there's something else. The Empire's scientists will be studying every second of that battle. Your tactics, your weapons, your FTL signatures. If we're going to survive, the Colonial Fleet and the Rebellion need to work together. Formally. You're asking us to join your war, Roslin said. I'm saying you're already in it, Mon Mothma replied gently. The moment you destroyed that Imperial fleet, you became enemies of the Empire. The question isn't whether you fight. It's whether you fight alone or with allies. Tai scoffed. Allies who rely on droids and mystical energy fields. Allies whose technology we barely understand. And you rely on nuclear weapons and jump drives that shouldn't exist, Dodonna countered. Neither of us fits in this galaxy's rules. Maybe that's exactly why we need each other. The debate continued for hours. Pragmatism versus principle. Survival versus independence. The colonial leadership was fractured. Some saw alliance as inevitable, others as betrayal of their search for Earth. Finally, Roslin raised her hand for silence. Now, we'll put it to the Quorum, again, but this time I'll make a recommendation. She looked at Adama. Admiral, your military assessment? Adama studied the star charts displayed on his terminal, the Empire's territory, the Rebellion's scattered bases, the vast unknown regions where the Colonial Fleet might hide. Finally, he spoke. The Empire has industrial capacity we can't match. They control most of this galaxy. They'll hunt us relentlessly. He paused. But the Rebellion has something we understand. Desperation. They fight because surrender means extinction. That's a language we speak fluently. So you recommend alliance? Roslin pressed. I recommend survival. If that means fighting alongside the Rebellion until we find a way home, then yes. Conditional alliance. We maintain our independence, our government, our right to leave when we choose. But we coordinate military operations and share intelligence. Mon Mothma nodded slowly. Those terms are acceptable. The Rebellion doesn't seek to absorb you. We're not the Empire. We simply ask that you stand with us against tyranny. The Quorum voted the next day. This time, the margin was wider, 18-7 in favor of alliance. Tom Zarek abstained, his political calculations recognizing the inevitable. The Colonial Fleet and the Rebel Alliance would fight together. In the weeks that followed, the fleets worked in parallel. Colonial engineers studied Rebel technology while Rebel scientists marveled at FTL drives. Pilots trained together, learning each other's tactics. Starbuck and Wedge Antilles developed joint fighter doctrines. Gaeta and Rebel intelligence officers began mapping colonial jump capabilities against Imperial fleet positions. And in the brig, Gaius Baltar remained imprisoned, his fate undecided. Some called him a war criminal, others, a pragmatic hero. The debate would continue for years. On Galactica's observation deck, Admiral Adama stood with President Roslin, watching the combined fleet work in the shadow of the gas giant. We came here looking for Earth, Roslin said quietly. We found something else. Another war, Adama replied. No, another chance. Roslin turned to face him. The Cylons destroyed our colonies. But maybe, in this strange galaxy, we can build something new. Not a replacement for what we lost, but something that matters. A reason to fight beyond just survival. Adama watched a Colonial Raptor dock with a Rebel transport. He'd cruise from different universes working together. The people need hope, Madam President. Something to believe in beyond the next jump, the next battle. Then we give them purpose, Roslin stated. We don't just fight to survive. We fight to matter. To prove that even strangers from beyond the stars can stand against tyranny. In the distance, stars glittered. Alien constellations in a galaxy that wasn't home. But perhaps, Admiral William Adama thought, home wasn't a place. It was the people you fought beside. The principles you refused to abandon. The choice to stand when falling would be easier. The Colonial Fleet had found its war. Now it would discover its destiny. The galaxy would remember the day the Colonial Fleet arrived, though not as the refugees had imagined. In Imperial war rooms across 1,000 systems, Strategists studied the Battle of the Gas Giant with mounting concern. A single Battlestar, outdated by galactic standards, armed with primitive kinetic weapons, had destroyed 5 Star Destroyers and killed a governor. The Emperor himself watched the battle recordings, his yellow eyes narrowing at the sight of ships that moved through space without hyperspace lanes, weapons that ignored shield technology, and tactics born from a war the Empire knew nothing about. "Find them," Palpatine commanded his admirals, "and bring me their technology." The hunt had begun, but the Colonial Fleet was no longer running alone. Integrated into the Rebel Alliance's network, they became ghosts, appearing in Imperial territory through FTL jumps that defied prediction, striking targets the Empire thought secure, and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Viper pilots taught Rebel squadrons aggressive tactics learned from fighting Cylons. Colonial Marines showed Rebel ground forces what disciplined military action looked like. And slowly, reluctantly, the two groups of desperate warriors became something neither had expected: brothers and sisters in arms. Admiral Adama stood in Galactica's CIC 6 months after their arrival, studying reports from across the fleet. The modified FTL drives were holding, fuel production was stabilizing, and casualties, while painful, were sustainable. They'd lost ships, lost pilots, lost civilians in raids that went wrong, but they'd also won victories. Freed rebel prisoners, destroyed Imperial weapons facilities, proved that the Empire wasn't invincible. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Rebel Command," Dwala reported. "It's Mon Mothma, Priority 1. The view screen activated, showing the Rebel leader's face. She looked older than she had 6 months ago, worn by the weight of command, but her eyes held something new: hope. "Admiral Adama, President Roslin. I wanted to inform you personally. We've received intelligence about an Imperial weapons platform. It's a space station capable of destroying entire planets. They're calling it the Death Star." Mon Mothma paused. "We're assembling a strike force. We need every ship we can spare, including Galactica." Adama exchanged glances with Roslin, who'd joined him in the CIC, a weapon that could destroy planets. The Colonials understood that horror intimately. They'd watched their worlds burn under Cylon nuclear fire. "When?" Adama asked simply. "Soon, possibly weeks. The plans are being analyzed now." Mon Mothma's expression softened. "I know I'm asking a lot. This isn't your fight, isn't your galaxy. But if the Empire completes this weapon, then nowhere is safe," Roslin finished. "Not for the rebellion, not for the Colonial Fleet, not for anyone who values freedom." She looked at Adama. "We'll be there." After the transmission ended, Ty approached Adama with a datapad. "Supply report. We've got enough ammunition for 1 major engagement, maybe 2 if we're careful. After that, we're throwing rocks." "Then we better make them count," Adama replied. In the pilot-ready room, Starbuck briefed her squadron on the upcoming operation. And around her sat Colonial and Rebel pilots: Apollo, Wedge, Hera, Boomer, and a dozen others who'd learned to trust each other in the crucible of combat. They wore different uniforms, flew different ships, came from different worlds, but they'd bled together, and that made them family. "This Death Star," Starbuck said, studying the preliminary intelligence. "It's bigger than anything we've faced. Our Vipers will be gnats attacking a Battlestar, but gnats can still sting." She grinned. "And we've got experience making the impossible look routine." Wedge raised his hand. "What's the plan if things go wrong?" "Same as always," Apollo answered. "We improvise brilliantly and pretend we meant to do it that way." The room erupted in laughter, gallows humor shared by warriors who knew tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. In his cell, Gaius Baltar received an unexpected visitor. President Roslin stood outside the bars, her expression unreadable. "The Quorum's decided your fate," she said quietly. "You'll stand a trial once this war ends. Until then, you're confined to quarters under guard. You'll work as a scientific advisor. Your expertise is too valuable to waste." She paused. "But Dr. Baltar, if you ever launch another weapon without authorization, I'll have you airlocked personally. Understood?" Baltar nodded, too exhausted to argue. "Why not just execute me now? Half the fleet wants my head." "Because we need everyone," Roslin replied. Even the people we don't like. Even the ones who make terrible choices for good reasons. She turned to leave, then stopped. You saved us at the gas giant. I can't forgive what you did. But I can recognize that sometimes survival demands terrible prices. Just no more nuclear weapons, please. As she left, Balter sat alone with his thoughts and the ghost of number 6, who smiled with satisfaction neither of them deserved. The Colonial Fleet hung in space beside the Rebel Alliance, two groups of refugees bound by shared enemies and desperate hope. They'd found no Earth in this galaxy, no colonies to call home, no end to their running. But they'd found something else, a cause worth fighting for, allies worth dying beside, and the chance to prove that even strangers from beyond the stars could change the fate of a galaxy. Admiral William Adama looked out at the combined fleet and thought of the long journey that had brought them here. The Cylon attacks. The blind jump. The impossible arrival in a galaxy that shouldn't exist. They'd lost so much. But they'd gained something too. Purpose beyond mere survival. Sir, Duala called out. Fleet reports all ships ready, awaiting orders. Adama took a breath, feeling the weight of 50,000 lives and the future of 2 rebellions resting on his shoulders. Then, he gave the order that would change everything. All ships, prepare for jump. Coordinates to the Death Star staging area. It's time to show the Empire what the Colonial Fleet can do. The stars beckoned. The war continued, and somewhere among those alien constellations, a legend was being born. Of refugees who refused to surrender, of warriors who fought for freedom in a galaxy not their own, and of the day when 2 impossible fleets stood together against tyranny. The search for Earth would continue. But first, they had a Death Star to destroy,